Hello, welcome. I'm Roxy Hunt. I'm one of the festival directors of Lower East Side Film Festival, and welcome to this bonus filmmaker Q&A with the wonderful Caroline Lindy, who's here today to talk about her film, Your Monster, which is a part of the Out of This World short showcase. Welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I was saying I think we're wearing like almost the same outfit, so that's pretty the work from home, uniform.
Right.
And welcome back. You are an alumni filmmaker, so thanks for thinking of us again and submitting, and also producing another great film that we were really excited to have in the program. Tell us a little bit, for those who haven't seen the film, just sort of a little logline description of it.
It's about a young woman who's had this really rough year with illness and heartbreak, and she moves back to her childhood home to discover that the monster in the closet who used to haunt her as a little girl is there and wants to talk about life. That's what this little short is about.
So tell us a little bit about where the idea came from, and you kind of have, just from seeing your last film, seems like a little bit of a angle on sort of like supernatural-esque type experiences, but existing in the real world. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I think I mentioned this last year at the festival with my last film, which was a ghost love story. And this is more of like a buddy dark comedy story, but with a monster. I think I like taking those traditional tales and kind of flipping them on their head and making them like a tad darker, because we're living in darker times. And I think people are less interested, and I feel less interested in just the classic fairy tale or just a simple love story, boy meets girl, boy meets boy, girl meets girl. I think a little bit more interested in, I don't know, I think I'm having a little more fun telling stories that are explored in darker, more fantastical worlds, because that is how I feel in today's society. I feel darker. I feel like it's a dramatic time. And so when you add monsters and ghosts, you get to raise the stakes with everything. So that's where I think why I tend to go towards the supernatural. But this story in particular is based on stuff that happened to me. So it's a kind of a truish story. And I didn't want to tell it I didn't want to just retell exactly what happened to me. That wasn't fun for me. I wanted to tell it in a more exciting and fantastical way.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to spoil it or give any spoilers. However, most folks watching this Q&A ideally have just watched your film. So I'll say, folks, if you're watching this and you haven't watched her film, go ahead and watch it, or pause this, fast forward to 5 minutes from now in this. But in that vein, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit too about what was that personal story that you felt like you wanted to see on screen, and how did you go about writing a film with such a personal subject matter?
I think that I, as someone who likes to create, to tell stories and make films, I took, it's always I think a way to get closure on something that's happened to you, to transform it into art, something that's been a traumatizing experience. And so I got diagnosed with cancer and simultaneously went through a really bad breakup and got my heart broken. And during that time, I felt like full of rage and sadness, and I kind of felt paralyzed by those feelings. And because I had to heal from this illness and also from this heartbreak, it was like I was kind of stuck at home with battling my monsters. And that's where it kind of gave me the idea. But then, you know, I was like, through that process, there's this kind of dealing with your monsters, but it's also this kind of beautiful thing because you're befriending your monsters too. You know, these monsters that inside you that you're always trying to push away. But when you're sick and you're paralyzed by sadness and fear, you have no choice but to deal with them. And if you actually befriend them and get to know them, then maybe one day you can move beyond them, or they can reveal themselves in ugly ways, you know, and you can be like, ugh, these monsters are actually destructive and I have to move beyond them, or they're good, they give me power, they give me strength. So it started, you know, it got me thinking about all those different themes. And I actually originally wrote it as a feature, and then I got this grant through Women in Film to turn it into a short. So that's how the short was made.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that too. And that's a really inspiring way to look at overcoming obstacles or grief or whatever it is that people are going through, and turning it into art. And also it's like you said, it's like a buddy comedy. So it's kind of, you know, fun to experience that through this lens, and you know, in a really unique way that it manifested itself in a really cool film. But you know, also were there times too when with such a tough subject that when you were making it, were you just like, I don't, like, you know, what kept you going on revisiting this struggle that you've been through, or you know, revisiting that when you were seeing it playing out through the amazing actress that you have in your film? And if you talk about how you came to grab her too, she's amazing.
Kimiko Glenn, yeah, she is awesome. And I was thinking about, I wanted someone to play her who had kind of who had a, physically was like seemed really, really small, and like kind of has a very innocent presence, but like inside she's like this larger than life. Like you can tell that there's like this quiet ferocity in her gaze. And I feel like Kimiko really has that. And when I was thinking about casting, someone was like, I think actually Kimiko's agent is on the board of Women in Film, or was on the board of Women in Film, so she might be interested. And like, you know, she's a really great big actress, so it was like fingers crossed. But then her agent was thrilled, she loved the story, and then she was like, I love Women in Film, and like, I'm sure Kimiko's gonna love this. And then we sent her the script, and Kimiko really liked it, so she was down to do it, which was so exciting. And then watching her go through it, well, first it's like, you know, when it's a personal story, you're like, oh, she's doing it differently and then the way it happened to me, but it's adding so much more. You know, it's kind of, it now is not my story completely anymore. It's like, it's more generalized, which I like. You know, I want it to move away from just what happened to me and become a story in and of itself, in its own thing. So that made it easier to like watch it play out when we were actually filming it. But it was still hard. I mean, like there was these moments when she was crying on the bed or like in the bathroom that was like, oh, this hurts the heart to see. And it made me feel, you know, made me remember what it's like to go through those moments of when you feel really alone in the world. So, but it was very cathartic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, when it was all finished, were you feeling like, okay, I can kind of, it gave you any kind of closure, you could kind of close that chapter a little bit? You know, I'm sure it's never really closed, but
Yeah, no, I felt very like the chapter was closed. And it was actually so funny. The day after we finished filming, I ran into that ex-boyfriend, and I hadn't seen him in like years, and I didn't feel anything. I was like, oh, this person who used to really just wreck my heart when I saw him was like, I'm done with this chapter of my life. So I was like, aha, I've overcome this, which was really strange.
amazing. And yeah, talk a little bit too about, like, you know, you mentioned it was a feature, or the idea was for a feature, and then it got adapted into a short. So what was anything sacrificed in order to cut it down, or, you know, is there still plans to make it a feature, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to make it into a feature. I mean, the short, it was so hard to turn the feature into a short. And I had two options, and I had mentors through this Women in Film production program. I had two options, which was like, I could take a snippet of it and just like one scene and turn that into the film, or I could kind of condense the whole movie into a 15-minute short. And I decided to try to condense the whole movie. So much is left out, but I wanted to create like a nice arc to it where you really get to see like, you know, what the feature could be. Um, instead of just one little scene. So it was really, I mean, it was really, really challenging. Because I had to take out so many lines, and even in the 15-page script, when we were editing it, I had to take out huge chunks of scenes because I didn't want it to be longer than 15, 16 minutes. So it was hard. It was really, really hard.
Yeah, that sounds like a really difficult task. But I think you're right. It came out great, and also I think we see a lot of shorts come through the festival that feel like they are part of something bigger, but they still don't really tackle a full arc, you know, like it feels like almost a proof of concept for a larger piece, which is great. But I think it's a lot more rewarding sometimes to be able to program stuff that isn't a promise of a larger feature necessarily. It's able to contain the whole arc, and you still get, it could still eventually be a feature, obviously, but like you still told a full story in a nice, like tight, compact way. So I think you did a really good job of doing that. Tell us a little bit about your monster, your lead actor, and how did you come to find him, and also how did you go about his look?
So Tommy Dewey is also like a really great actor. He's the star of Casual on Hulu, and he's just been in a million different projects. And so I'm trying to really move into directing and writing mostly, but you know, I have acted for years, and I was in Casual for a couple episodes, and I was in scenes with him. And it turned out we like knew a couple people in common. He was so nice, and he was a writer, so we talked on set. And then I randomly bumped into him like 6 months before I found out about the grant. And as we were talking, I was like, oh my God, there's something about his voice. Cause I was writing this feature on the side. He would be like the best monster ever. Cause he just has a really dry sensibility. And then when I found out about the grant, we had emailed a little bit. So he had seen some of my other work. But I emailed him after I got the grant, and I was like, would you ever consider playing the monster? And he's like, plays the heartthrob usually, or like a dad. We never get asked to play a monster. So he's like, Women in Film, playing a creature, like, of course, happy to help. And then I found this really amazing special effects makeup artist who was like, where do you want to go with the monster? And I was like, I want him to be, you know, like a attractive monster. So we came up with that look, and I think to me, he's an attractive monster.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it could be a lot, you know, scarier. He's lovable, you know.
I wanted him to be appealing, but not like too goofy looking. So yeah, our makeup artist Oasis was just incredible. And yeah, we found like a cheap ladies wig that he like put a bunch of grease in. And yeah, it's just so, I mean, because we had a limited budget, we made that we created the monster for as cheaply as possible, but it's just so exciting to think that he was like, this is nothing. We were doing the bare bones for creating a monster. If you actually had, you know, a lot of money to spend on creature makeup, we could make him look so much doper. So it was just like, he already looks incredible to me. So I can't imagine how how his look would change if you had just like a little bit more money.
Hmm. That's surprising because yeah, I think it looks very like, you know, it adds a lot of production value already. So you know, I'm curious too, like you mentioned that you have the grant and those things, but were there, which obviously is super helpful in getting the film made, but were there other things where you really had to pull from creativity rather than from budget in order to like accomplish something? Or was there any, you know, moments that you maybe it was like so almost like a forced creativity because you didn't have the money that you wanted, but it actually benefited the film?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that that always ends up happening when you're working with a tight budget. You're forced to think outside the box, so it can eventually lead to like really amazing creative solutions. Because you're like, oh, it's like, I know this person who can make this weird type of mask, and it's not what we were expecting, but it like ended up looking great. But I think I do have to say that I was really lucky in the sense that Women in Film is an organization helping women and um, women from diverse backgrounds in the film world, you know, help them create films. And so everyone was, we had so many sponsors and we had so many people who were just willing to help because they, you know, support the organization. So that made our life a lot easier because sometimes we like go to out to some company and say, hey, like we can't afford that, like can you give us a discount, we're making a film, we're working with this nonprofit, and they'd be like, yeah, sure, here's 50% off. So we got really lucky in that way. But I know that's not going to be the norm moving forward. But yeah, that was really, really helpful. And everyone was just extending themselves. So people who are used to working for a lot more money were like, you know, I like the story, so I'm just gonna, you know, work really hard on this and do the best that I can, even though you don't have the funds to pay for everything.
um I mean, and also I'm just curious on my end, and this is not something we have to include per se, but was it a difficult process getting the grant, or you know, how did you go about getting in touch with Women in Film? And you know, I think sometimes for filmmakers that can be a really intimidating process, and that there's like no light at the end of the tunnel because there's probably thousands of people submitting for stuff like this. So what was your process like?
Well, during the whole Me Too movement, when it like first started, I heard I think someone who's like a really I can't remember who it was because it was like I was driving my car and it was a Women in Film member talking on NPR or something about women in film and how they were trying to become like a leader in the Me Too movement and give voices to women who had undergone, you know, sexual harassment in any kind of way. And I was like, oh, this sounds like a great organization. I want to become a member. So I signed up to become a member, and then I found out about, you know, they were doing all types of discussions about the Me Too movement and everything. But then I found out that they were doing like a shorts night. So I submitted my last short, and that was my first real, you know, like people from from the board of Women in Film happened to be there that night, and they saw my short Kindred Spirit, and so then they started to know me. And then I randomly saw an email that there was like the grant application, and there's like apply now if you're interested. And then I applied, and you know, it's like any grant, like you have to fill out all these questions, and then, you know, there was a couple of rounds of interviews, and then I just happened to get it. But I think what helped was that they knew me already as a filmmaker. So when I said I want to make something that's similar, like exists in the same world, this is also a supernatural kind of love story like my last film. So they're like, okay, we get her thing and we like this story. So here's the grant.
Well, I mean, that's awesome. And I think that shows too that if you have a specific point of view that you can show people or prove that you're going to show people, that that's helpful,
Yeah.
you know, and can kind of make you stand out. Um, So that's cool to hear. Well, one other thing we've been asking people too is, how has your work changed or shifted or whatever.
Someone is on the lawn outside.
Oh. I was just gonna say, how has your process of filmmaking changed at all, during this time? And do you feel like, what do you think is the foreseeable future for indie projects that you're working on?
Well, I've been working with this commercial company called Sandwich Video. And I just started writing and directing commercials for them. I don't have any plans I've been writing narrative projects, developing narrative projects, but no plans to shoot any of those anytime soon. But for the commercial work, it's, they're doing a lot of skeleton crews and virtual shoots. So it's like only a few people at a set, and then the whole rest of the team is on a Zoom call, a Zoom video chat, and it's all live streamed. So it's super strange. Or they send all the equipment to the actors at their homes, and then the DP walks them through like how to use all the equipment. Everything is labeled, and it's super like bare bones, filmmaking 101. So yeah, really, really different world. Also doing a lot of like green screens, 2D, 3D stuff, but also very like simple 2D, 3D stuff. So very, very different. And I'm learning how to do it all.
Keep up the good work. We hope to see more of you soon.
Yeah, so good to see you.
All right, have a good day.
You too, bye.
Bye.